Hello and welcome to the back page. It's the 8th of May and the weather has turned chilly. There's a cold front moving up and, well, some of us may secretly find ourselves complaining about that excessively warm autumn weather that we had, just 3 weeks ago when it was humid and seemingly very unseasonably warm for that time of year. Today's topic is management care, as I call it. You may have heard it as wellness care, supportive care, the concept of people seeing a chiropractor on a regular basis that's booked, most commonly monthly, whether they're symptomatic or not, to just keep on keeping on. The reason why I wanted to talk about that is because for many it forms a really important part of their chiropractic care. It's a different approach to what many people take with their spine. It's based on the idea that on a day-to-day basis, we are loading our spine, we are wearing our spine, and as a result of that, we just tend to stiffen up. There's a graph that I'll put up which we can talk about a little bit more, which talks about how tissues heal. Essentially, there are 3 stages in tissue healing. There is inflammation, proliferation, and then remodeling. Essentially what happens is the first time you have insult to cells, you usually get an inflammatory response, which is the response the body has to stimulate that process. You then have this process of proliferation, which is where the body says, all right, we've got damage here, let's just get a whole bunch of cells in there to plug the gap. And the final stage is reorganizing it, which is where the body remodels those cells. It may replace them, it changes them, but it molds them to suit the purpose that it has at the time. I often use the analogy of an ankle. If you roll an ankle, the first thing that will happen is it will probably be painful. You won't be able to walk very well on it. And then after that, the pain goes away, but it probably still feels a little bit wobbly, doesn't feel as strong as it did before. That's this proliferation stage where you have cells essentially plugging the gap and healing to some extent. The process is initiated, however, it hasn't completed. And what you tend to find with an ankle is it'll just feel that way for a while, and then as you work it, as you mold it, as you use it, it strengthens and strengthens, and eventually you achieve full recovery. There's a similar model that I'll talk about in other videos with the disc and why the traction has such a powerful impact on managing the disc. So is it essential? The answer is no. Is it better? Many people seem to feel that that is the case. Some people are very good at figuring out when it's time to come in, okay? And that's one of the reasons why in the last video, I talked about the quick screen with the neck, okay? Which is a quick screen that you could do. You can do it every day, you can do it every week, once a month, however often. Just a quick screen to see how your neck is moving, if it's grabbing, if it's catching, things that might indicate that it's a good idea to come in and see us. On the other hand, a lot of people just book once a month because they feel that if they come in once a month, get a grease and oil change, get the sticky hinges oiled, things just work better. And the reason why that is if we tag back to that table that I was talking about earlier with that stages of tissue repair, one of the things that tends to happen as we go from that proliferation stage to the remodeling stage is sometimes we don't always recover our full range or full function. And the negative to that is that we don't end up getting our full range, our pre-insult or injury range back afterwards. And that's why we tend to find, or what I find throughout time, between adjustments, people, they just rust up. And that's the result of, it might be sitting at their workstation all the time, or doing certain things, they just tighten up, especially in the spine, because the spine has such a complicated arrangement of joints and discs. It's very easy for one of them to tighten up, and then others to just compensate. And then you end up with this focal part of your spine, a segment, if you like, that isn't moving properly. And chiropractors are extremely good, the best easily. I mean, to be completely honest, the entire profession is based on the skill set associated with identifying stiff spinal joints and restoring normal motion. Most chiropractors are very, very good at that. They may have a range of different techniques that they use to get there, but at the end of the day, the outcome is much the same. So, what does that mean? It means that it is elective care. You may or may not choose to get it. Most people who do get it feel a whole lot better for it. By the same token, if that's not part of your health paradigm and how you choose to manage your spine, that's okay as well. It's not imperative that you do that. But it is something that I, through my practice, I will offer or suggest that this is something patients could benefit from, and if they take it up, they take it up. If not, I mean, the truth of the matter is, if there's a problem that requires additional servicing, okay, or additional oiling of the sticky hinges, they'll find their way back, okay? But for many with a busy lifestyle, it's just easy to book that regular adjustment and come in and get the sticky hinges oiled, because otherwise life can get on top of you, and where you planned, oh, I'll go in next week, and next week in January very quickly becomes next week in May as the year starts to get a roll on us. So weigh all of that up. We'll probably talk about that more in other videos. Think about the science that underpins that, behind how tissue heals. Please check in with the website and have a look at the workstation assessment method. Have a look at the car posture app. Have a think about using the isometric stretches. Even consult the previous video and think about when I was talking about the quick screen. The quick screen, as a reminder, it's essentially just standing in the mirror, get yourself set, turn your head as far as you comfortably can to the left, and then the right, look up, look down, put your left ear on your left shoulder, similarly the right hand side, and if you want to be really fancy and really push it, combine looking up, turning to one side, and then putting your ear on that shoulder. That will really test things. And things that you're looking for are clicking, grinding, discomfort, sense of pain is obviously going to be a big one, although hopefully that's not the case. And just the general sense of tightness or fullness, or maybe even you can notice that your range is restricted, because that's what we do find is a lot of patients between adjustments, they go from, say, being able to easily achieve 80 degrees of rotation to maybe getting around 60 or 70, and that's this rusting up phase. By the same token, that might not be something that's a problem for you, and that's fantastic. But at least by doing the quick screen and you've got the exercises, you know, and you can, to some extent, objectively measure how your neck's moving. We'll clarify that further in further videos, but for the moment, let's have a quick break. Hi, and thanks so much for watching. I just wanted to ask you to remember to like, share the post, tag in your friends, and even better still, from a personal perspective, if you can comment on the posts. That engagement provides me with really important feedback to tailor my message to deliver the information that people really need. Thank you. What a refreshing break. I wanted to finish today's back page by talking about the stages of care. There's a lot of different thought processes and how people break that down. There's a lot of practices out there in all health professions that have a very regimented protocol to the sequence of visits and what's done in certain visits and the schedule that patients get. That's never really sat really comfortably with me. To be honest, with patients who just want you to give them a definitive answer and tell them what to do, that's possibly been a barrier to those patients, because I don't want to simply tell you what to do. I want to empower you to make better decisions as far as your spine is concerned. So consequently, when it comes down to management, I use a 3-tier model. Those tiers are acute or chronic, subacute or subchronic, and then management care. I use the term management care. You may have heard of wellness care and all sorts of other versions of it. But it's essentially what we talked about earlier in the video, which is the idea of getting essentially regular servicing for your spine. So to go through those quickly, acute or subacute is an intensive period of adjustment. Obviously, acute is acute pain. Chronic is where you have chronic pain. And when we have chronic pain, when we have injuries that we've had for long periods of time, they don't tend to be as acute, sharp, hot, burning pain. They tend to be more of a constant, low grade, always there, always dogging us pain. In terms of schedule, generally speaking, the schedule for these conditions is 3 visits per week. typically with a day in between. So as an example, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's the acute pain schedule. So if you come in with a hot disc, and when I say hot disc, I mean you have an inflamed, painful disc that's restricting you, that's the schedule that we will recommend. If you come in with an acute torticollis, which we've also talked about in earlier videos, which is obviously pain, turning your head, that's the schedule that we will recommend. Obviously, there's other things that we do, exercise prescription, ergonomic stuff, according to the 5 pillars that we've talked about previously. But fundamentally, 3 visits a week. Acute or chronic care ends with the cessation, finishing, of acute or chronic pain. And then there's a reevaluation and a discussion with respect to subacute or subchronic pain. Subacute or subchronic, simply put, in the simplest way, is where you no longer have that acute pain or that chronic pain that's just always there really inhibiting you. However, you can still aggravate it by doing a certain task, or you come into the clinic and I can reproduce that pain even though you weren't aware that it was there. Because what's happened is the inflammation has dropped, the function has returned just enough for it not to bother you, but it's still there. In terms of when subacute or subchronic care finishes, it becomes a bit more subjective. The great thing about pain is it's really easy to measure. We can get you to we can get you to give me a number, we can get you to put it on a line. There's all sorts of mechanisms to measure it, but it's quite easy to measure, and it's also quite easy to motivate people. There are a few things that motivate the human being more than pain. So that ends, goes to subacute. Subacute is a little bit trickier to mark the end of it because it becomes more subjective, which means it's more about your expectations and your perception and what your goals are than pain being the driver, if you like. Subacute care, typically you would be looking at something like 2 visits per week, can depend on cases, probably less of a trajectory, but once again, if it's a chronic case that you've had for years, you might need more subacute care. If it's an acute case that's just bobbed up the first time you've ever had it, well, you probably need less. Then we get into this grey zone between subacute and management care. Management care is essentially elective care, so care by choice that's aimed at maintaining you and managing your spine in the best possible condition that you want. Okay, so as you can imagine, it gets a little bit grey when we move from subacute to acute. Some of you may find that confusing, and I will work further on this in further videos. I will produce infographics just to help help clarify and spell it out. But essentially, my approach to patients is I would like to give you those 3 layers, tiers of care, educate you on what they are, when they are relevant, and then allow you to make the decision. Because that's the kind of practice I want, because I think that's the kind of practice, when combined with the 5 tiers, which I will talk about in other videos and keep talking about, quite frankly, that gets the best result in the spine. Because what I'm most passionate about is achieving the best outcome for you and your spine in the long term. Thank you very much for your attention. Remember, like, share, subscribe, leave comments. I don't get a lot of comments at this point in time, but I really want to get those comments so that I can tailor this information to suit you. Have a great week.